We're going on camera now. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the public board meeting of November 27th, 2024. I'm calling the meeting to order at 10 a.m. And I am now going to ask Trustee Dwyer to give the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm glad to do this morning on behalf of Sturgeon Public Schools. Respectfully acknowledge that we teach, learn, and grow together on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have called this land home for countless generations. We recognize the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and Inuit for their care, love, and stewardship of this place. We are grateful for those who share their knowledge with us and help to foster a respectful relationship with all of our relatives on this land. We are committed to understanding the harms done in the name of education and continuing to learn the honor. The true spirit of Treaty 6 is a promise of friendship, collaboration, and peaceful alliance. And we honor that we're all here together and able to meet together in this situation and look to make the best of what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dwyer. As you can see, we have a full agenda today, and I'm looking for an approval of the agenda at this time. Trustee Briggs. Trustee Buga.
Sorry, may I make an addition to the agenda?
Certainly.
10.6 under our special committees, just a very brief rural caucus update. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Buga. Trustee Briggs, would you like to approve the agenda with the addition?
I approve the agenda with the amended 10.6 added.
All in favor? Carried unanimously. I'm hoping everybody's had an opportunity to review the minutes from the previous public board meeting. And if so, can I have an approval of the minutes? Trustee Buga?
I move to approve the minutes of sorry, what was the date? November. Oh, thank you. October 23rd?
Yeah.
Public board. Thank you.
All in favor? Carried unanimously. No business arising from the minutes. Number 6, presentations, delegations. 6.1, audited financial statements. Associate Superintendent Corporate Services, Sean Nichols.
Thank you, Board Chair. So just with us online here, we have our auditor from MNP, Benji Washer here. He will give a kind of a presentation and I will share here in 1 second. Can you just double check, John? I had to. Just 1 second, I'm having technical difficulties.
Thank you for your patience. Just a little technical issue here.
No problem.
See when this one light off.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead, Benji, and I'll just try and follow along. Let me know if you need me to scroll or anything like that.
Sure, sounds great. All right, my plan today, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Benji Wasser. I'm a partner with MNP based out of our Leduc office. I think this is our third year doing the audit for Sturgeon. So my plan today is to kind of go through very high level overview of the financial statements, really just touching on 2 pages of it, the statement of financial position and the statement of operations, and then going briefly through our what we call our audit findings. So just so the board members are aware, we did have a meeting last week. Well, some of the board members were there, and also with the audit committee, kind of going through everything in more detail. So there was a lot of good conversation and questions at that point. So the plan today is just to give a very high level overview. That being said, if you do have questions, don't feel free to ask at any point. Do my best to answer those for you. But just so you know, this is just like an overall summary, and it should be pretty quick unless there's lots of questions. But I guess with that, I'll jump right in here. Maybe just go to the next page, which is our audit report. I'll just touch on this. Or sorry, I guess it's after the table of contents. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of our opinion on this, because it is sort of what you're getting with the audit is MNP's opinion on your financial statements. So basically it just says that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the division as at August 31st, 2024. So kind of a long-winded way of saying that it's a clean audit opinion. If you did have something that was wrong that we needed to bring to your attention, we would have what's called a qualification, and it would say a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion or something like that. And then there would be a specific paragraph outlining what the problems were. But obviously you don't have that issue. So a clean audit opinion is the best you can get for an audit. Okay, so then to jump right into the financial statement numbers themselves here, if we go right to the statement of financial position, so you can kind of see this on the screen here. I like to call this basically a snapshot at your year end. So when I say this year or current year, I'm referring to your August 31st, 2024 fiscal year. There are 2 columns here, you'll notice. The first one on the left, that's the 2024, that's August 31st, 2024. And then the 2023 numbers represent August 31st, 2023. So you can kind of see where you were at a year ago compared to this year's audit. So I'll just go through some of the high points that I'd like to point out to you, just so you're kind of aware of where you are comparatively. The first section at the top is your financial assets. So that's things that are cash or will become cash. The first one is basically what's in the bank. So your cash and cash equivalents. You can see it's sitting at 11.5 million. It's down about 4.3 million from the prior year. 15 million. The reason for this is basically because there was a deficit, an overall deficit from operations in the year. And, sometimes people might think, oh no, a deficit, but you actually budgeted for a deficit because there was definitely some reserves that needed to be utilized. So this wasn't or shouldn't be unexpected, not a bad thing at all. It's basically you were spending into a deficit position on purpose. So when you have a deficit, you obviously use up some of that excess cash, which is why that's down. Accounts receivable is just timing of receipt of funds. So that's pretty similar to last year at about 500,000. On the liability side, kind of in that next chunk there in the middle, accounts payable is sort of the first one that has a number, and that is basically what you owe to other groups or vendors. Basically, that's about $440,000 lower than last year, sitting at 2.6 million. And this is just, again, similar with receivables, just timing. So you might have done some work in, say, August that you haven't yet paid for, and you will pay for it after your year end. So that's why it would be sitting in accounts payable. The next one, unspent deferred contributions. I like to look at this or think of this as sort of your carryover funds. So monies that have come in for specific purposes that you just haven't yet spent. So this is funding from the province or other sources that has specific stipulations, and you just need to carry over those funds until next year. So you can see that's gone from 3.3 million down to about 2.6. So that's a decrease of about 700,000. The one single biggest item in there is the recognition of your PUF, so program unit funding revenues. So in the prior years, that number has always been deferred. And if you kind of remember from other years, we always had a SUD item on it, on your statements for that, which is basically an unadjusted difference. So something that we thought should have been recorded as revenue, but was deferred. This year, all of that was fixed. So the whole amount of PUF was taken into income in the current year. So everything is correct now, from our opinion. So 2.6 million is what you have left over of funds to be carried over into next year. Next item here is asset retirement obligations. You remember me probably talking a lot about this last year because that's when it became a regulation. This year is the second year that you've had to record asset retirement obligations. And if you remember, basically this is an estimate of what it would cost today to clean up all the potential contamination at different schools. So for school boards, it's mostly around asbestos. That's the big ticket item. So if there's asbestos in the walls of some schools, it's fine. There's no contamination unless you start tearing it down. Then there's some special work you have to do to clean it up properly. So you can see that's gone up from 8.2 to 8.5 million. Essentially, that's just the inflation. So as you know, as every year that goes by, things become a little bit more expensive. It's no different for this liability. So every year that goes by, this will keep increasing unless you actually do some of the work, which then obviously would reduce that liability. Moving on down to the non-financial assets section, the biggest number there would be your tangible capital assets. So that's your hard physical assets that are going to last longer than a year. So obviously schools would be the biggest one there. It's gone down a little bit, about 1.8 million from 96.9 to 95.1 million. The reason for that is mainly your amortization. So the depreciation on your assets was more than what you added to the pool. So some of the additions in the year, some of the bigger ticket items anyways, there was about $1.2 million of Alberta infrastructure work done at Camilla. There was actually an outdoor classroom as well at Camilla for $240,000. There was a maintenance shop renovation that was done. That was about $600,000. Redwater lighting project, there was about 250,000. And then Redwater also had some gym floor work done, which was about 250,000. So obviously there's more stuff than that, equipment and things like that. But those are the sort of the big ticket items that we noted. And those are all offset by, as I mentioned before, amortization, which was about $4.8 million. So that's basically the reduction of your asset value. Every year that goes by, you depreciate a little bit, right? So that total was about 4.8. So the net of the additions minus the amortization was that decrease of about 1.8 million. Next item I wanted to touch on, sort of further down the page, spent deferred capital contributions. That's kind of what we call SDCC. So this one is basically the funding that you received specifically for capital projects. Instead of going into revenue, it goes into this special liability account. And as the asset depreciates, you get to take income into your income statement. So that's what this number represents. It's your supported capital assets. And it's gone down basically in the same rate as your tangible capital assets above, which makes sense, right? If you're adding supported assets, this liability is going to go up. And if you're depreciating more capital assets, then this number will go down. So you can see it's down from 82 to 80 million as well. So pretty similar to the change in your tangible capital assets above. The next item here is your accumulated surplus. The accumulated surplus is essentially what's left over. So all your assets minus all your liabilities. You can see it's sitting at about 13 million. I'm just going to touch on what that's made up of. There is a separate schedule, but I wasn't going to touch on it. I'll just mention it here. But basically that number included in there are your reserves. So you've got about $3 million set aside for capital reserves, and then about 3.9 million set aside for operating reserves. The rest of it is just your equity in your tangible capital assets or investment in capital assets, which is what you own free and clear, basically, or unsupported assets. So the more important piece, I think, for a school division would be your reserve balances, which, like I mentioned, together was about $8 million. So, or I guess 7 million, 3 million plus about 4 million in operations. So about $7 million overall in your reserves. Any questions about this page before I move on to the statement of operations? Okay, perfect. So we'll move on to the next page. So this one looks similar to the previous one. One thing you'll notice is that's different is the green column right in the middle, which is your budget. So this would be your original budget that would have been presented to the province. That is basically what you're shooting towards for both revenues and expenses. And what I'll give you here is sort of a breakdown of how far away or close to the budget you were in 2024. So the top section is your revenues. The first item on the revenue section is your Government of Alberta funding, which, just like any school board, is the biggest piece of the funding pie. You were sitting at about 76.8 million that you brought in from the province, and you budgeted about 76. So all in all, it was about $800,000 more provincial funding that came in, which is good. On the federal government side, you had budgeted about just over 1 million, and you brought in about 950,000. So that one is a little bit under budget from an overall perspective. On the fee side, so this is fees charged at schools and various things. You brought in $1.8 million, which was just slightly under the $1.9 million budget of fees, so about $100,000 less. And then on the flip side, the ones below here, these are all things that you brought in more than budgeted. So for sales and services, kind of a catch-all there, about 280,000 was brought in, and you budgeted about 189, so a little bit more there. The one that is quite a bit higher is your donations. So donations, you can see that it was about 518,000 that was actually brought in compared to $121,000 budget. Similarly with other, quite a bit more brought in than the budget. And I would say this is pretty common in the school divisions that I've looked at this year, and well, any year really, is you budget a little bit lower on those areas because it's really unknown, right? You don't know how much is going to come in for donations or other types of revenue. So most boards are pretty conservative on this, just in case the money doesn't come in, right? So it's a better idea to under budget and bring in extra versus over budget and then spend money you don't even have yet or you don't know you're going to get. So this is pretty common to be over budget on donations and other. So overall, when you factor in all the different revenue sources, the school division's total revenue was about 81.6 million compared to 80 million in the budget. So overall, more money came in than you were budgeting for. On the expense side, this one is actually, other than the first one, which is a little bit different, you can see that the instruction ECS is a little bit over budget by about 870,000, sitting at 4.5 million spent. So there was just more teachers than expected, more salary costs. That's kind of the only one that's a little bit off of budget. If you can see the rest of them, they're all really close. Instruction is about 500,000 under, but again, that's on a huge number, 60 million. So it's pretty small in the big scheme of things. And then the other ones are even closer, right? Your operations and maintenance, 10 million. Transportation is at 6.1 compared to 5.8. So again, really close. And then system admin is 2.8, which is what the budget was. And external is about the $300,000 mark. So overall, everything was very in line with what you were expecting to pay out, which is good. Total expenses then is 85 million. When you take that away from your overall revenues of 81 million, you're left with that operating deficit of 3.5. And as I mentioned before, sometimes people look at it and say, oh no, we have a deficit, that's bad. We spent more than we had. But as you can see in the green column, you had budgeted for a $4 million deficit. So even though you did spend more money, that was the plan, to get some of those reserves used up. So you actually, your deficit overall was less than about $700,000 less than you had budgeted for. So all in all, I think it was pretty good use of the funds this year. Any questions about this one? There are a number of other schedules and notes and things, but this was sort of the high level overview that I was planning to provide to the board today.
Any questions from the board? I have one actually. What items are lumped into other revenues?
So I know of one. So one was there was a payout from ASBE. I think it was 128,000. That was one of the bigger ticket items included in there. If you need more detail, maybe some of the folks in the finance side can answer that one.
Associate Superintendent Corporate Services.
Thank you, Board Chair. Yeah, we had some comments in there as well too. Just not comments with Alberta Ed, but Careers Next Gen and ATA and a few other areas. So those are accounted for in there as well too.
Thank you. Any other questions? Looks like I was the only one, Benji.
Okay, perfect. So if that's the case, then I'll just flip over to our audit findings. You can put it up. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly and just touch on the high points. So it's kind of up to you if you want to throw it up on screen or just have me chat. Just let me know.
I'll just have you chat about it, Benji, because
Sure.
it's not in
Okay,
this
great.
document I
Yeah,
have
so
right here.
overall, that's great. Overall, basically the findings, like I said, I went through it in detail with the audit committee, but I just wanted to touch on some things. So this is basically our opportunity to let you know of anything sort of other than the financial statements that we wanted to bring to your attention. So the first thing was actually that we always kind of bring up fraud and error, right? And one thing that's kind of unique, I guess, this year is that there was an instance that was noted. And I mean, the good thing is it wasn't something that we found. It was something that management brought to our attention. So it was already found out about before we had arrived. And it was basically a small cyber attack, basically where somebody's banking information was updated. Somebody called in or emailed in to get their banking information changed. And then some money was paid out. A pretty small amount of money was paid out prior to basically knowing that it was a suspicious bank account. So it was a pretty small amount of money, but your team found it and brought it to our attention, and we kind of looked into things and kind of noticed it was just a one-off, and your controls were kind of updated to mitigate that in the future. So that was the one thing I wanted to bring up. There was no issues around non-compliance with laws and regulations. There was no going concern issues. We worked well with the finance team. It was sort of their, I guess, a new group was in there this year, as you know, some new people. And so, I think it went well this year. There was a couple little delays, but everything worked out well. We did have one SUD item, actually, which was around that PUF that I mentioned before. And it wasn't an issue around this year necessarily. It's because it's always been deferred. And this year it was fixed. So management fixed everything this year so that this will be the last time it's on that SUD. Going forward, it will come off, which is great. And then the only other thing that I wanted to mention is we did have one area or one item that came up in just a recommendation around improving controls. And that was, we did notice that employees have access to both create and post manual journal entries. So our suggestion was basically segregating that piece as best as possible, where one person would create a journal entry and then another person would approve and post, or at least approve after it's been posted. So just that specific approval process is a little bit more segregated. So it makes sure that there's no kind of funny journal entries going through without at least two people looking at them. So those are sort of the highlights of the audit findings. Any questions about anything I mentioned?
Does not look like it, Benji.
Perfect. Well, I guess with that then, my formal part is complete. I don't know if there's any just general questions or anything like that, but before I forget, I did pass along the signature pages to management. So they should be somewhere in the room, I'm guessing. So I guess the next step would be, I don't have to be present for this, but the financial statements would be approved, and then the signatures would get signed and passed back to me, and then I can put everything together. You'll notice in those financials that it said draft across everything, and that's just because it's always draft until they're approved, and they haven't been approved yet. So once the signatures are back, I put everything together without the draft watermark and fire it back to your team to be submitted to Alberta Ed.
Want to close?
Yes, so thank you, Benji. Yeah, we have those right here, so we'll get those signed kind of after we do the motion. It gets approved and get those off to you. One comment I just want to make is I just want to thank the finance team as well as our executive director here for all their kind of hard work. Yeah, they had the boots on the ground kind of people doing the hard work. So yeah, I just want to say thank you.
And then on behalf of the board, I'd like to express our gratitude also to our external audit committee members, Niels Jensen and Heather May. As well, the finance department obviously has our deep gratitude. This is months worth of work for 2 very pretty pages that we get to look at in public, but yes, and Benji, thank you so much for your care and attention to our financials.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. I think we will now move on to number 7, action items. 7.1, the 2023-2024 reserve transfer approval. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Shauna Warren, Superintendent. I will turn this over to the Associate Superintendent, Corporate Services.
Thank you, Superintendent. So in line with the statements that just have been presented, we have a little bit of a breakdown of the reserves, both to operating capital and just the net transfers that are kind of going through here. So in the report, you'll just see that there's a net increased operating reserves of $825,000, and the breakdown is listed in the report, and a net transfer decrease to capital reserves of $250,000. 2 tables are attached to kind of outline a little bit more detail about how those are broken up. I'll just speak to a few items on there, but we have set money aside for the planned deficit for next year, and then as well as some money for the following year for the deficit that will most likely be occurring as well too, as we slowly rein in our costs to get us to zero. In an effort just to mitigate the ebbs and flows of our budget and try and gradually bring us back to a place of zero. We have set aside some money for insurance deductible in case we have an insurance claim, and then as well as some money for elections that will be coming up in the following school year. In terms of the capital reserves table, the board starting or at the end of last year had $3.4 million sitting just kind of in one GL, and some motions have been approved throughout the year for usage of that money. So we have kind of broken that down to kind of show those and the usage of each of those projects, as well as set some money aside for potential bus purchases that we will require at the 2 high schools. In addition, there are some dollars set aside to help potentially in the future tackle some of our aging building and infrastructure issues. But that's pretty much a summary of the report. If there's any questions, let me know.
Trustee Buga.
Thank you, Chair. I know that we have been looking at these and we have asked a lot of questions, but I just want to make sure in public, just as a reminder, in our operating reserves where we have budget support line items for 24-25 and 25-26, can you just remind us of why we're looking at that and how the elimination of the bridge funding, I believe is what the terminology was, how that's looking for our next few years, just as a reminder to why we need to shore up those reserves? That's stabilization. Thank you very much.
Yes, so thank you, Trustee Buga. So yeah, we were notified coming into this year, and we got our profile that we would be reduced for the next 4 years, 25% of our stabilization grant, which is roughly $1.4 million. Kind of on top of that as well too, the board has been spending more dollars to bring down the reserves to make sure we're in line with the reserve cap that we had. So we have had a larger deficit in the past to bring down those reserves, and we have to now kind of move to a place where we're moving towards a net zero budget, as well as make some reductions to plan for the loss and stabilization funding that we will be receiving over the next 4 years.
Trustee Marie Elliott.
Trish Marie Elliott, Ward 4. A quick question on table 2. We have some money put under field houses. I know there is some concern about the Sturgeon Comp field house going ahead, so I'm just wondering if some of that funding would be going towards that project. Associate Superintendent Corporate Services, sorry.
Thank you, Board Chair. So as it sits, that money has been set as per board motion, set aside for the field house. We will require, though we have done some planning, that's why a little bit of dollars are spent there to get kind of a cost estimate. Before that project moves forward, though, I know they have gotten some donations and some other things like that, but we will need to ensure that we have the funds available before we actually completely move forward with that scope, but it is there as per the board motion to support that project.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move to 7.2. Oh, sorry, I need a motion to approve. Trustee Marie Elliott, thank you.
Trish Marie Elliott, Ward 4. I move that the Board of Trustees approve the transfer of operating and capital reserves for the year ending August 31st, 2024, as outlined on Table 1, operating reserves balance August 31st, 2024, and Table 2, capital reserves balance August 31st, 2024.
Would anybody like to speak in favor or against? Seeing no one, can I get a motion, or I'm going to call a question that the Board of Trustees approves the transfer of operating and capital reserves for the year ending August 31st, 2024, as outlined on Table 1, operating reserve balance August 31st, 2024, and Table 2, capital reserve balance August 31st, 2024. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now moving on to 7.2, 2023-2024 audited financial statements. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Shauna Warren, Superintendent. I would like to turn this over to the Associate Superintendent of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Superintendent. So you just got a pretty detailed overview of financial statements from our auditor here. And this motion is just to kind of approve those statements. I won't go through them again in detail, but we are required by legislation to have these approved and submitted by November 31st to the government. So this is just a motion to ensure we're meeting those deadlines and our regulatory requirements.
Can I have somebody make the motion? Trustee Briggs.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the 2023-2024 audited financial statements for the year ending August 31st, 2024, as presented at the November 27th, 2024 public board meeting.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question that the Board of Trustees approve the 23-24 audited financial statements for the year ending August 31st, 2024, as presented at the November 27th, 2024 public board meeting. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. The 7.3 draft Sturgeon Public Schools Annual Education Results Report, AERR, November 2024. Sorry, Benji, you don't need to stay for this part.
I thought I'd just see the motion through, but yes, thank you very much. And yeah, I guess once I get everything signed back, I will make sure it all gets put together and we'll meet the deadline that was presented of November 30th. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The AERR, Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. Shauna Warren, Superintendent. I will turn this over to the Deputy.
Thank you, Superintendent. John Conrad, Deputy Superintendent. And presented for your information, but administration is seeking approval through motion of the annual education results report. This is where I speak a bit off cuff, and in a moment I will be handing this over to our Director of Education Planning, who with the team have really dug deep, have tried to present the information in a way that you can understand and ask questions of. But I would like to remind the board that this is a process now that should start to be familiar. It's been a couple of years since we've separated the 3-year plan and the results report under direction from Alberta Education. And in this report, we present how we've done. This is all of the measures that the province asks of us and all school divisions, and then all local measures that we have decided to have through survey or whatnot to go to our students and our parents and our staff to find out more about how we're doing as a division. So that's the general. I will also remind, I'm sure you're about to do this anyways, but I'll remind the board that this is in alignment with the previous 3-year plan, not the one that you just approved last May. And the one last May has those 3 goals that we're really working on, right? Empowered learning, healthy school communities, and responsible leadership. This results report aligns with the one ahead of that. And that one was very clear with the 5 assurance domains. So you should see that represented in the information today. That's enough of my front end. And I would ask that the Director of Education Planning proceed with the report.
Thank you, Shannon Campbell-Requa, Director of Education Planning. Thank you for the opportunity to present the overall summary of the 2023-24 AERR. This draft is for your consideration, and as mentioned, it measures the progress towards the outcomes of the 2023 to 2026 education plan. We thank the board for engaging with this draft information over multiple opportunities. Today, we will provide an overview of the division achievement organized by domain. So as opposed to reading over the fine point detail, we will be providing a governance level summary for each domain and every outcome. To begin, I'd like to start on page 7 if you're following along in paper format. And we will begin with student growth and achievement domain. The first outcome outlined under this domain is that students achieve provincial learning outcomes, demonstrating strength in literacy, numeracy within real-world applications. So in terms of summary of literacy achievement in our school division, we note high achievement in English language arts at the 30-1 level and very high achievement in 30-2 level of excellence. This is an area of celebration. We also see a strong reduction of at-risk students in grades 1 to 3. In terms of numeracy, both PAT and diploma results indicate a clear need for continued focus on numeracy instruction division-wide. When we examine engagement results, overall engagement survey data has remained fairly consistent. We see a slight drop from last year. When we examine this data, though, in detail, we see that drop is particularly specific to junior high parents. And we notice a substantial decline from that group, which absolutely impacts the results overall. In terms of our local survey data around engagement, that highlights that 75% of our K-12 students agree or strongly agree that they are successful in school. And 58.3% agree or strongly agree that the things that they learn in school are useful, and those are highlighted as areas of success. Shifting to the outcome around students demonstrating citizenship and respect for the uniqueness of all learners. When we examine the citizenship data from the overall lens, we see that we have a slight increase from last year in our overall achievement. And particularly of note is the increase from teachers, which reverses a previous 4-year downwards trend. So for the first time in 4 years, teachers are noting that citizenship is improving in schools. Local student survey data highlights citizenship as an area to continue to focus on. And with 24.9% of grades 4 to 12 students disagreeing or strongly disagreeing that students are kind to one another at my school. We also see this data reflected in our parent surveys, and with 18% of parents disagreeing or strongly disagreeing that students demonstrate respect for one another. This highly informs our divisional focus on supporting citizenship moving forward. The final outcome in this domain, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit students experience academic achievement at rates comparable to non-Indigenous peers. When we look at this domain in terms of high school completion rates, overall general high school completion rates in the division have increased by 4.4% for those 3-year graduation rates. And for Indigenous students in particular, we also see a slight increase, and we are 18% above the provincial average in this area. This is a huge area of celebration. We continue to work, however, to close the gap between the Indigenous student achievement and students identifying as non-Indigenous. We do note that the 5-year graduation rates have seen a decline, but I think it's important to consider the year range of those graduates, as they would have been fully impacted by the COVID years in their earlier high school experience. So I will ask you now to shift to teaching and learning domain, which can be found on page 17 of your document. So in terms of the overall outcomes in this area, we were focusing on continuous leadership development prioritized division-wide. Teachers and leaders believe in their ability to impact student learning, plan effectively, and design inclusive environments. And teachers and leaders use a range of data to implement effective assessment and evaluation practices. In terms of measures towards these outcomes, in terms of education quality, overall, we see a slight increase again from last year and are within 1% of the provincial average. Our local student survey data revealed that students agree and strongly agree that their teachers treat them kindly, with 85% of students responding in that way. 75.8% of students agree or strongly agree that their teachers treat them fairly, and that 75% agree that and strongly agree that their teachers keep students on track. In terms of parents, 80.8% of Sturgeon parents who've responded to the survey agree or strongly disagree that they're satisfied with their children's teachers. We do see that 68.7% agree or strongly agree that they are satisfied generally with the education their children receive. And so that, again, is a point for focus. The
Sorry. Trustee Murray Elliott.
Sorry, just to comment as we go. I feel that that is more a curriculum thing than a division thing. Not sure how everyone else, like, these education my child is receiving is by curriculum, which is not really our decision.
Thank you for that. In terms of in-service professional development, this is an area of celebration division-wide. We see high achievement in this area with an increase over last year, and we are 9.9% above the provincial average in terms of teachers believing that professional development is improving over the course of the last 3 years. So I'll now shift us to learning supports. You can find this domain on page 21. The outcomes we are working towards in terms of learning supports, where public school communities are safe, caring, respectful, and inclusive, and mental health supports are recognized as critical components to student success and well-being. In terms of welcoming, caring, respectful, and safe learning environments, we see a slight improvement overall, and we are within 1% of the provincial average. And we see improvements with teachers and students, which again demonstrates a pattern with a slight decrease from parents. In terms of access to supports and services, we see a slight improvement from last year, and we are above the provincial average by 1.5%. Again, a slight decrease from parents and slight increases from students. In terms of our student data with regard to this outcome, student surveys revealed that an area of focus for us is that at our school, it is okay to be different, with 4.2% of students disagreeing or strongly disagreeing that our school is respectful. Again, we see a theme of citizenship that led us to focus specifically on that area. Overwhelmingly, Sturgeon Public School parent survey respondents agreed and strongly agreed that our school communities are safe at 78.7% and caring at 79.7%. Parent respondents disagreed or strongly disagreed that students have access to appropriate mental health supports to the degree of 9.7%. And that school communities are respectful. 10% of parents disagreed. Although those numbers represent a marginal group of parents, we do take those numbers of note and continue to focus on ensuring that students have the supports that they require and that we are creating respectful learning communities. The final outcome in the domain of learning supports is that all students achieve within communities committed to truth and reconciliation with understanding of foundational Indigenous knowledge. K-12 students highlighted, grades 4 to 12 students highlighted that they learn about First Nations Métis Inuit schools to a high degree, with 82.4% of students agreeing or strongly agreeing, and 81.5% of students agreeing that or strongly agreeing that they learn about residential schools. In terms of the parent survey data in this area, it's very interesting. Division notes a high degree of parents who were neutral when asked that if are our schools committed to truth and reconciliation, with 27.9% of parents selecting a neutral response. In terms of our school demonstrates respect for Indigenous ways of knowing and being, again, we see 23% of parents with a neutral response. It's interesting because we note that the number of parents who disagree or strongly disagree is very small in this area, but the degree of parents who are neutral is quite high. So this really indicates for us potentially the need to communicate the things that we are doing more widely with parents so they have a better understanding of the things that are happening in schools. Okay. Shifting to the overall summary of governance on page 27. Governance outcome was that students, families, staff, and community members are committed to a shared vision for optimal learning with opportunities for all to be involved. So in terms of parental involvement, we saw a 3.3 achievement improvement over last year, and we remained within 2% of the provincial average. And in this case, we saw increases from both parents and teachers overall. Pardon me, as compared to last year. 84.6% of Sturgeon Public School parents survey respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they had opportunities to be involved in their school communities. We had 13% of parents that disagreed or strongly disagreed that their perspective is valued. So while parents overall are reporting high levels of opportunity to be involved, we see a need to continue to focus on valuing the perspective of parents. The final outcome under the domain of governance was that resources are allocated and managed in the interest of ensuring student success. And at this point, I would turn the mic over to the financial services team if they would like to provide an update of the financial planning and reporting section of the AERR.
Thank you. So we're on to pages, I believe, 32. Is where we start that. And so it's just a high level summary, and we kind of went through that with our financial statements. But it starts off with a high level summary of budget, high level summary of expenses by program, and the results on to page 34. Just speaks to just kind of a comparison to budget, and we went through that, and in terms of variance, very low, very close to budget. And the biggest items or increases over revenues was discussed earlier over that deferral of PUF, and expenses in some of the areas, operations and maintenance would be utilities was a big factor of that. Insurance also adds to that, and transportation. There is additional routes, I believe, this past year that were added. And on page 35, then there is a summary of the accumulated surplus. So that is essentially all of our operating reserves, capital reserves, and investment tangible capital assets. That's also found on our financial statements that were approved just recently. And the report goes on to show, also speaks to the 3-year capital plan that we have in place. And that one I might turn over to Sean for speaking to.
Thank you. So just listed in the 3-year capital plan is what the board has already approved for last year and will come again for approval. But just our 2 main priorities, which is our Gibbons and Landing Trail solution, which is just the amalgamation of the 2 schools to request a new school. And then our Morinville Public School, which is just a request to have a replacement and change the grade configuration to help balance the enrollments between Morinville Public and Four Winds. Besides that, we're having a community engagement on December 2nd, so everybody come out. 3rd, 7th or 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to me, Shannon Campbell-Rockwell, Director of Education Planning. I will now invite you to head to page 37 for our final domain, local and societal context. The outcomes in this domain were around students demonstrate respect for themselves and others and show pride in their accomplishments and community. Students implement student volunteer opportunities in their communities and encourage participation in division-wide events. And partnerships with external agencies are in place and used to enhance the conditions required for student achievement. So in terms of the data that measures success towards these outcomes, our grade 4 to 12 students widely felt that they were part of Sturgeon Public Schools. And we saw that over half of students reported that they volunteered at school or in the community. What's interesting about this result is that we also saw 23.7% of students that disagreed or strongly disagreed that they volunteered within the community. So students are reporting that they are either incredibly active in volunteerism and leadership or not at all. And so that informs our work when we look at universal opportunities for leadership and community involvement. 21.3% of students disagreed or strongly disagreed that they had been leaders at their school in some way. And that absolutely informed our current education plan around creating opportunities for leadership. 73.2% of parents agreed or strongly agreed that community and volunteer involvement is encouraged at school, and 4% of parents agreed and strongly agreed that students are proud of their community. So parents are recognizing widely that our students are proud of their communities and that they're encouraged to become involved. And with that, I would just make a quick note on our program offerings. And so through the course of this AERR, we mentioned several work experience, career internship program, registered apprenticeship program, dual credit program, the Green Certificate program, and others that demonstrate our commitment to career pathway education in Sturgeon Public Schools. We are also dedicated to excellence in teaching, open communication, and inclusivity. Thank you for engaging with this result report. We are very grateful for your continued attention to these results.
We'll open it up for discussion. Trustee Buga.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to the team for this report. This is a huge undertaking, but it really does bring back what the decisions are in this boardroom, what they look like in our classrooms. Sometimes it works, sometimes it seems to miss, but the fact that we're acknowledging where we need to realign is always really important. I just wanted to clarify, and I don't know why I didn't ask this earlier, just when it comes to like the professional learning surveys and the teachers, is that all staff or is that teachers specifically when it comes to that? Because I know we do provide some professional learning for various areas.
Thanks, Shannon Campbell-Requa, Director of Education Planning. The Alberta Education Survey is just teaching. However, our Sturgeon Survey represents all school-based staff.
I have a question. So, numeracy in the division. It's constantly a concern and an area of focus, has been for the 7 years and 1 month I've been on the board. I understand that you need to look at trends and longitudinal study points. However, it continues to be a problem. Now, appreciating that our young ones just received new curriculum and appreciating that our middle grades are part of the pandemic era, how are we going to improve that? And I guess specifically my question is, if the average is X, that means half the provinces below, half the provinces above. How do we get to the above part? Thank you. Deputy Superintendent?
Thank you, Chair. And a challenging question that we continue to bring in our leadership, both the principals, they are first and foremost instructional leaders in our schools, our curriculum specialists, and our teachers that have been recognized even nationally for excellence in mathematics instruction. We have good things happening. When we look at the schools that have seen more improvement in addressing lagging skills through, understanding the data from screeners, and then looking at the schools that have been able to see the most improvement in into working with the kids that have been identifying, hey, we need some more help with these skills. We do see the schools that have consistently implemented the strategies that we are working with. They're research-based, they're in our PD plan. They are seeing the greatest improvement in their classrooms. Knowing that now, from a data point of view, this year and future years really are focused in, okay, if we have these pockets of success, how do we get it into the other schools that need some support in getting these systematic approaches to mathematics instruction? I agree. Since coming to the board table, I've been saying, okay, we're focusing on 5, 6. And as you described, though, and then we got hit with COVID, and then we got hit with new curriculum, and the province is down 10% on achievement tests. So we are not alone, but that is a context. It cannot be our excuse. So in K-4, K-6 for sure, we have got a consistent program now, methodology. It's going into its second year. Second year, it doesn't mean everyone knows this. Like, it takes a while to get, so the schools that know this program and approach, that teachers understand this is for them to use within their classrooms, going well. Need to ensure, we've already bought this, I'm talking about a resource now, but I'm just giving an example of exactly how we're addressing mathematics in the K-6 frame. Now we have this in place and we're using success to help in areas that need a bit more support. Now I'm speaking high level because I think the board needs to hear that high level, but I definitely would say the director is connected more on the ground with the curriculum groups, with the math working groups specifically. And is there something that should be added from this point of view in terms of addressing mathematics?
I honestly would just echo that core statement that we know that we have areas and pockets of success. And so that's within our own context and sometimes within some of the most challenging contexts in our division. And so we have a proven formula. It now is about engaging leadership, engaging school-based leaders, and I mean informal leaders in terms of teachers, EAs, other support folks to unite behind an idea that we have a systematic approach. It takes time, and I think I'm thankful for the support of allowing this to be a continuing priority.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none, I will ask for the motion. Oh, Trustee Murray Elliott,
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the Sturgeon Public Schools Annual Education Results Report, AERR.
would anybody like to speak in favor or against? Then I will call the question that the Board of Trustees approve the Sturgeon Public Schools Annual Education Results Report, AERR. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll give Ms. Reckbaugh a moment to collect her stuff if she chooses to leave. And thank you so much. Moving on to 7.4, Sturgeon Public Virtual Academy closure. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. This does require a board motion. So we have been speaking about this for a long time. Now there are new trustees here. So again, the previous board the board did pass to open an online school in response to COVID to a virtual school. And over the past 4 years, the enrollment, we haven't ever had the enrollment. So if any of those people that were on the board, the previous board, you'll remember that it was a projection on how many students we thought we would have and what would happen. When that didn't ever come to fruition and the enrollment numbers have dwindled each year. And the board will remember each year that we've actually had to drop a grade of online learning just because, as you know, we're funded by enrollment and it's just not sustainable. So currently, this current year, the letter there is attached that was sent to parents last year. As we've been shifting the model, we are shifting the programming so that it shifts to more of our as an outreach, but you can do outreach grade 8 to 12, and we're currently supporting students that way right now. And however, the reason that we're asking for a closure is there's actually a school number that's attached to this through Alberta Education, so we actually have to close that school. So that's part of that process. And again, can turn it over to the Associate of Corporate Services, or if any of the trustees have any questions. I know the deputy can support me in that also, because we were part of the initiation of this school when it opened.
Trustee Dwyer.
Joe Dwyer, Trustee Dwyer, Ward 3. So if anybody needs this type of service, there's other places they can go.
Superintendent Warren.
Are you looking for specific grades?
No, I'm just want to make sure that if someone absolutely needs the virtual situation versus anything else, is there a place for them?
It fits into the grades that we have, which is 8 to 12. And if it's other students, we have home education that we can offer families. But our enrollment, I mean, again, we offer programming if there's a need, and our numbers have not even been close to that.
Okay.
And I don't know, do you want to add anything else? John, go ahead.
One of the distinguishing characteristics of SPVA when we were working with kids was, specific together, online time, by camera. We know that is the most engaging that we can provide in an online situation, but obviously that ratio demands that we have near the same as classroom, because we're literally putting a teacher in front of a group of kids. What we have noticed now is that our learning centers have moved their materials online. And so the learning centers can facilitate at a distance online education in those grade levels in a similar way. They just don't have that hey, it's 8 o'clock. No, 8 would be too early. Hey, it's 10 o'clock. It's math. We're all getting on together and we're talking right now live. We will not be able to provide that, but we will be able to continue to provide access to online education through our learning centers.
I have a question. What, if any, feedback have we received from parents regarding this?
That we're moving a grade away each year? Well, every year we've had the discussion. I mean, because it began, remember it was 5 to 9, and so slowly we had to move a grade. It is difficult for those families that are looking for that. But one shift we have found, and you'll notice this, most of those families, they chose to be back in schools. And so they made the choice when they could be back in schools, they were back in schools. And so, yeah, I mean, as John said, or the deputy said, we are very fortunate that we have our learning centers and we've been running them for a very long time, and we do a great job. And during COVID, as you know, we did do the big push of creating our courses online, et cetera. So we've actually expanded and actually changed how our learning centers look, because we are looking, if anybody remembers before we even opened SPVA, it was very much focused on outreach for high school. And we've expanded that now. So it's the opportunity. It's just, as the deputy said, it's just not synchronous. We're all together learning together. And that was obviously not the choice for parents, because they were choosing to go back into the classrooms, into the schools. And I don't know, again, the deputy wants to add anything else, but I know our few parents, it was hard because, again, we want to be able to offer everything to everybody.
Trustee Pequin, then Trustee Puga.
So moving forward with the Learning Center, if it closes, the grades 8 through 12 will be offered at the Learning Center, barring any like unforeseen thing, but it will be 8 to 12 from now on. Yes?
Yes, and we do have some exceptions where there could be other grades potentially, if that was something that very close working principal, family, the director of learning services and the deputy, that there could be some considerations, because it's our alternate programming, right? But it is through the outreach, and it's how it's running right now with our outreach. I don't know if the deputy would like to add anything else. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just thought of something that should be clarified too with our learning centers. While they facilitate at a distance, and I've been recently talking, like really trying to get to know how are things different now than before COVID, and that is one key difference, that their entire program can be facilitated at a distance. But we actually encourage kids to come in. We have teachers in the centers, and yes, they are teaching at a distance, marking at a distance, and communicating in text format and other preferred things for our young people. But we have teachers present in our learning centers that will elbow partner with the child, working through that math problem, and give that direct instruction and direct help and support.
Trustee Puga.
I saw this on here and my heart dropped a little bit, because my family was one of the first into the SPVA, and I fully feel that the role that it played in my children's education was huge in teaching independence and how to work online and take responsibility for their own education. I have also seen, though, in the last couple of years, the way that we have supported the learning centers to fill in that niche. And we see the enrollment dropping. We see that it's not a need running as SPVA anymore, but I'm thrilled that we have a fantastic new space in Gibbons for our teachers and our students to learn. We've adapted this building to make sure that there's a really keen space for the kids to learn and the staff to teach. And I sit at those school council meetings, and the staff that are there have been in this environment of distance education for so many years. I feel like we've got a huge amount of experience in this type of education, and I think that they're going to really adapt to whatever, the families that don't quite fit into the regular school situation. I really feel like we do have the ability to fill in those gaps, even with this motion on the table to close essentially the virtual academy in name. But I feel like the programming is really solid going forward. So I don't know if anyone else was nervous about that as I was, but I really have done, taken a look at it and reflected a bit on the improvements that we have made and the changes that really we've just kind of made it more efficient, and I will be supporting.
Trustee Murray Elliott.
Trish Murray Elliott, Ward 4. We've heard as the board that closing a school can be a very complicated process. So I just want to ensure that we have ticked all the boxes required in going forward with this motion.
Superintendent Warren.
Yes, that's why it was brought up last year, and the letter went out to all parents and let them know, because we follow the process in the Education Act and our policy 600 for closure of schools. And yep, we, as a board, you are dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
Any further questions, comments? Can I ask somebody to make the motion? Trustee Gibbons.
I make the motion that the Board of Trustees approve the closure of Sturgeon Public Virtual Academy after June 30th, 2025.
Trustee Buga spoke in favor of this already. Is there anybody else who would like to speak at this time? Seeing none, I call the question that the Board of Trustees approve the closure of Sturgeon Public Virtual Academy after June 30th, 2025. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving to 7.5, Policy 700, Superintendent of Schools. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to turn this over to the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources.
Thank you. Lisa Lacroix, the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources. As you'll see before you, Policy 700 has been reviewed several times through the Policy Committee and through the Committee of the Whole. The evaluation framework focuses on accountability, mutual respect, and ongoing improvements. AP 729 outlined a solid process that include feedback, evidence-based assessments, and opportunities for open dialogue between the superintendent and the board. By incorporating this AP into Policy 700, the board is demonstrating its commitment to clear and collaborative approach to the evaluation. This integration ensures a consistent framework for evaluating the superintendent that aligns with the SLQS and the Education Act. It also reinforces the board's important role in this process, promoting transparency and stronger governance. A motion is required, and administration is prepared to respond to any questions.
Would anybody from the Policy Committee like to comment on this before we move forward? Trustee Pequin.
As chair of the policy committee, I can. We've gone through this a few times in our policy committees, and administration has made sure they have linked the SLQS and made it very user-friendly for those of us looking for information about what a superintendent leadership quality standards are and how this policy should be. So, I mean, we're not speaking in favor or against right now, but we've had a thorough look at it and thorough discussions and added all the parts we wanted added. So,
would you like to make the motion?
Sure, I will move that the Board of Trustees approve Policy 700, Superintendent of Schools, as presented at the November 27th, 2024 Public Board meeting.
Would anybody like to speak in favor or against? Seeing none, I call the question that the Board of Trustees approve Policy 700, Superintendent of Schools, as presented at the November 27th, 2024 Public Board meeting. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We will now move to number 8, administrative reports. 8.1, holiday artwork selection. Would you like to lead us or introduce it? Superintendent Warren?
Here, Shauna Warren, Superintendent. Well, we are very excited that the board is going to unveil the winners of this year's holiday artwork, and I am going to turn it over to the chair. But it was very exciting to see all of the submissions, and I know that the board, it was very challenging for them this morning to make a united decision for K to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 12. And we have some outstanding artists, and I will turn it over to the chair.
Yes, first I would like to publicly and formally thank all of the students who submitted a piece of artwork. It was very heartwarming to see how many. First, I should tell everybody, this is not a school initiated activity. These pieces of art are created outside of school time. We had 3, 4, 5 times the submissions that we did last year, and they're all beautiful. So to everybody who participated, you have our sincere gratitude. That being said, I'd like to announce the winners of this year's contest, starting with the K to 3 submission. This submission was put forth by Aubrey in kindergarten. Our 4 to 6 winner is Lexi, grade 4. Our 7 to 9 winner is Kara in grade 9. And our 10 to 12 winner is Zeta, grade 11. Thank you so much. You are truly all spectacular artists, and we are going to be very proud sending these cards out this year. Thank you again. Moving to 8.2, Sturgeon Public. Is there a motion? No. Moving to 8.2, Sturgeon Public School Scholarships 2023-2024. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I will be turning this over to the deputy. So this is every year at this time, you receive this report, and it's the report on the scholarships that were given out, and I will turn it over to the deputy.
Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair and Superintendent. John Conrad, Deputy Superintendent. For your information and celebration, presented to you are the scholarships that the board has indicated they will support monetarily and want to see going forward to recognizing excellence within our school division. I'll remind the board that there are significantly more scholarships and bursaries that are present in our schools, and I'm sure you've noticed that when you're at our award ceremonies, seeing the great community response that has gone directly to our high schools and our junior highs in supporting excellence across the division. These are either the scholarship and bursary that are directly supported by the board, or the Frank Robinson and Conica Minolta that well, they're also supported. The Frank Robinson is supported by the board, and the Conica Minolta is a partner of ours, but at the board level. So these scholarships are just administered here at the board level. As we look on the second page and we look at 3 and 20 and 1, 1, 1, 1 and the values, I need to confess that my math needs some support, because this should be a pretty easy math problem. We've got 2 scholarships at $250 each. That's 500. Match it to the 500 of the bursary. Now we've got 1,000. The 2 500s is another 1,000. Roll that up. We better get 25,000, not 19. So I apologize for that, and we will seek to amend that later into the permanent record. This is for your information. Administration's prepared to take any questions.
Trustee Pequin.
Janine Pequin, Ward 1. I know, speaking at Redwater Schools Council, they said they had a really hard time convincing kids to apply for some scholarships and bursaries. And then I see on here, like, the Sturgeon Public Schools bursary wasn't given out at Redwater High School. So, I mean, it's nothing we can do on a board level. And the school said, like, they were phoning parents, like, just apply. And we're having a really hard time getting parents and students to take the free money that is being offered to them. So I just kind of want to acknowledge that publicly, that I mean, we've led the horses to water, and sometimes we couldn't, like, they were begging them, please take the free money, and they still didn't, some didn't do it. So just to be aware of that, I don't know why.
Trustee Dwyer.
Ward 3, Trustee Dwyer. And I'll be honest with you, at the Rotary meeting, that was very confusing for the Rotary group. Like, basically I went there to present it and nobody applied on it. $300 some. And so it was a little bit of a discussion. We were thinking we were doing something wrong, but
Deputy Superintendent.
Thank you. If I just may comment, I really appreciate the trustees highlighting that our administration and our groups are calling, are contacting, are highlighting this. We do see in society, and Sturgeon is part of that, less students considering post-secondary right now. It is a challenge. But I'm thankful for the highlighting that came out here in public, is that we are calling, because of course we want to see this money taken advantage of by our Sturgeon students to continue their education and forward progression. So, but I just wanted to thank you for highlighting that.
I don't know why I put my hand up. I'm the one who's after Trish. Do you mind if I just ask a quick question? Is the application process daunting or difficult? Deputy Superintendent?
For graduates of our high school, no.
Okay. Trustee Murray Elliott?
Yeah, and it's been my experience that they can get help at the school filling out these forms, I believe. But my question is, you have noted that one student that graduated in 2022, 2023 received their award. So I know sometimes students aren't sure what they're doing or they forget. And I think that has happened even this year. So is it possible for a student who graduated in June to apply next year to get this award?
Deputy Superintendent?
What, John Connor, Deputy Superintendent, what we have requested all of our high school counselors and administration to clearly communicate to their kids is they apply this year as a graduate of this year. This allows us to complete the course average calculations and whatnot, and then we say to the child, you have met all of the requirements, and we will keep it until, and you'll see, we will always highlight if this is a child that has graduated in a previous year from us, they're Sturgeon, they met all the requirements, but the confirmation of program enrollment comes later, and we keep it for 1 year. But they can't not apply and then come to us later. That is the key difference, because we need to track, we need to know this is your graduation year, these are the marks we're using, because we don't use upgrade marks as well. This is you graduated, you walked the stage, you're a graduate. Apply for this and we will hold for 1 year that confirmation of enrollment in a program.
Trustee Dwyer?
And it's kind of confusing because the Rotary gives out one of these, and let's go back a year past that. A year later, that student hadn't even cashed the check. So maybe we're doing something wrong, I'm not sure. Or Rotary, I should say, not we, Rotary. But we actually made some calls to school and they checked into it or whatever. Oh yeah, I better cash that. I only bring it up because it just shakes my head like, what's going on here?
Deputy Superintendent?
Hopefully my last comment, I apologize for keep jumping in here, but I still I appreciate that we're talking about how we're reaching kids. I appreciate that we're saying, we'll even hold this ability, but you got to get the application in. But we should still be celebrating. We are a small rural school division, and we have $25,000 in scholarships that are helping kids be successful this year. Thank you.
Great way to close that. Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I think it's worth noting that we have many, many reasons to be proud of our graduates. Moving on to 8.3, snow removal and temperature monitoring process. Everybody's favorite topic in November. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair Shauna Warren, Superintendent. I will turn it over to the Associate Superintendent Corporate Services and to our Director Facility Services.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm just going to pass it over to our Director of Facility Services.
Thank you, Steve Holcomb, Director of Facilities. We have a few things here for snow removal that we've been doing. We have contracts secured for 5 schools closest to St. Albert. That includes Sturgeon Heights, Namao, Sturgeon Comp, Guthrie, and Camilla. The facilities team also deploys to assist the custodians on bigger snow events. And the custodians are responsible for clearing the sidewalks throughout the day at the schools. And the facilities team also manages the parking lots from MPS all the way out to Redwater at this point.
Trustee Gibbons.
I had sent the kudos to Superintendent Warren on Monday after our Saturday dump. I had to drop something off at Namao School, and the parking lots of the high school and Namao were fabulous. So great work with the plan.
Trustee Murray Elliott, and then Trustee Dwyer.
Trish Murray Elliott, Ward 4. Yeah, I was at the comp the other day and there were huge piles of snow everywhere. The parking lot was beautiful. Did we encounter any problems after that big dump of snow that we received over the weekend?
Yes, please.
No, the operation went really smoothly. Everyone jumped into place and we monitored it throughout and it was very successful. So.
Trustee Dwyer.
Again, thank you. Just maybe it was answered, but maybe the question is, if we had a good dump of snow, what would we expect from our process that all our schools would be in a place where they could park and drive? You know, is that a bad? I'm not sure if that's putting you on the spot or not.
I think what you can expect is that with so many different hands involved with different responsibilities, you'll see it happen quicker. We yet to test a snowfall that's during the week because we had the opportunity of Saturday and Sunday to get out there and clear some parking lots. So we're still, monitoring the system and seeing where we need to improve. But I think you're going to see a great improvement this year.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could speak to the rationale for why contracts for Sturgeon for the schools closest to St. Albert. What's the rationale?
Certainly. Closer to St. Albert, the cheaper the cost. We don't have the equipment and manpower in-house to clear all the buildings at this point. So that was the reason behind that. The accessibility of the contractors, I suppose, I would say.
Trustee Pequin.
So in the temperature monitoring process, wow. So it says during operational hours, if the temperature drops it triggers an alerts. And then it says that staff, when an issue is identified, they'll create a work order and email the office. So that's just for a non-emergency issue that we're just going to put a work order. Cause I'm assuming if something bad is happening, there's a process that we can make that faster and we're not just emailing and work ordering, right?
Yeah, good point. We find anything under 17 degrees is an emergency. So they can text us as well, they can phone, but the custodians and the principals, of course, if they see it or feel a drop in temperature, they get a hold of us right away.
And my question regarding this is, that's well and fine during regular school time. But what happens during breaks, i.e. Christmas, teachers' convention, spring break? Do we still have eyes monitoring?
Yes, of course. We have an on-call person throughout all the breaks. They get alerts if it drops below a certain temperature as well. And we also have custodians and our O&M team in throughout the schools doing larger maintenance issues, dealing with larger maintenance stuff. So
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for being on top of this. We've had problems in the past, and I feel relatively reassured that we're not going to run into those in the future. Thank you. Um, 8.4 IMR CMR report. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I will turn it over to the Associate Superintendent Corporate Services and our Director of Facilities.
Perfect. Thank you, Superintendent. So I'll just give kind of a summary of the report here, but you'll kind of see we put some background on kind of about the square meters we service in the schools. We spoke a little bit about funding, and we broke the report down into a few sections. So infrastructure maintenance and renewal and capital maintenance and renewal. We talked a little bit about funding, and I just want to highlight since 2020, 2021, our funding for the two was 1.6, just over 1.6 million. And then we saw kind of a decrease in the funding, I believe approximately around 500,000 over those years together. And then most recently, we have seen an increase. Last year, we got about around $1 million. And then this year, we've gone back up because CMR funds have been increased to 1.5 million, just under 1.6, but that is still lower than the 2020, 2021 year, especially during a kind of a period where inflation was through the roof and costs have gone up. That is just one of the challenges that is listed in this report. We have provided an overview of estimated types of projects we're going to be working on for both IMR, CMR, and some status there of whether they've been started or not. The whole process, and the director, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole process is through the information the facility team has, we put out a request to schools to identify what their needs are. We'll collect all that information. We'll kind of assess the needs throughout that, and then kind of build our plan from there. But we plan to focus the dollars towards these kind of items that are listed here. There is a PA system replacement just because there's a bit of a health and safety issue that we need to address. So that is why that's on there for various schools. We have also outlined on this report too, just what our spends, what our balance will be. And then as well as there are two attached reports that show the dollars that were spent last year. Something I just want to highlight to keep in mind is that to make things more confusing, besides calling it IMR and CMR, the years that we report on these for IMR is September to August 31st. And then CMR, the government wants us to report on their fiscal year, which is April to March. So we also get funding based on that. So it creates a little bit of timing lag and issues and things like that. The number that you see here for IMR, the end balancing matches our financial statements. The CMR number won't because of that timing issue and how we do our reporting and things like that and when we get money. So I just want to point that out. I will pass it over to the director if they have anything else to add.
No, I don't think that, but I appreciate what you said. Thank you.
Trustee Briggs.
I really like the detailed information on these reports. We did see it previously, and then we weren't seeing it. Now we're seeing it again. Is there any way, instead of saying various schools, we could list the schools that are actually potentially getting the work done? Also, another question I had is, do we have a plan put forward to ensure that there's equity across the division, that the schools that are in poorer shape are getting the help they need to bring them back up where they need to be?
I'll start and then you can add. We didn't put the various schools just because it would get quite long, as well as we actually don't have all the plan for each school yet. We've waiting till the 30th to get the request. But that's why in the IMR CMR we've listed all the schools on those attached reports as well too, so you can kind of see that and let us know if you have any questions. I will just point out one thing you will notice on that report. It does say for some like minor repairs, it says various schools because it was a lot of small things. And we're trying to find the balance between making this report super long and digestible versus not being too cumbersome and things like that. But even if you have anything to add.
Yeah, that's precisely it with the various schools. We haven't actually allocated all the funds to which schools are getting what. We're still trying to catch up in some schools that have been left behind a little bit in the past. So yeah, and about being equitable, absolutely 100%.
And that is my question, because one of the schools that's in the worst shape is in my community. So I want to make sure that we're getting that school back up to where it needs to be.
Thank you, trustee Gibbons.
Just a question, because I don't know the answer. I know that in 2018 was the last time that I think someone external came and inspected the schools and gave the big report. Is that something that needs to be done on, like on a timeline, that we need to ensure we have budgeted that potential amount in the future, that type of thing? I just don't know how often, or if you have a regulation on when the schools need to be inspected.
So there's a few things. If you're talking about the facilities condition index, the government used to come out and do that, and they've kind of stopped. So that number is getting quite outdated, and if we wanted to update that, we would have to do that. Our insurance company we pick a school every year, and the insurance company comes out and does an inspection for free and gives us a report back about deficiencies that we need to look at. They plan to do that to try and hit every school once, as well as assess the value of our school to make sure that what we're reporting on our insurance is actually accurate. I will pass it to Stephen here in a second, but there is some value in potentially having that conversation of whether we want to get people out to assess our own facilities condition index. I do think it was kind of done before, but I think more recent than 2018 when they did that value scoping with Select, but I'm just not 100% confident in how that was done, if they actually went out to the schools. So I don't know. I'll have to leave that to our director here to answer.
So I'm with Sean on that. I'm not entirely confident in that value scoping that happened. We are going out ourselves now and doing our own internal audits of schools, walking through with principals at this point monthly right now, looking at aesthetics, mechanical, electrical, health and safety, accessibility. Those are kind of the top things that we're looking at and trying to prioritize smaller projects. So really at this point, like Sean said, the government hasn't been doing these inspections, so we have to take it on ourselves. And whether we get back into a new valued scoping session or not in the near future, I'm unsure of.
Yes, go ahead.
Advocacy piece, advocate for that to come back, because if the government's not doing it, we have to pay for it or do it internally. And even when they're approving projects, I don't know. I personally think they should know the condition of our schools and have some accountability over us and what's going on. But yeah.
Superintendent, or sorry, trustee Buga.
I got a raise.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacey Buga, Ward 5. Sorry, just crossed my mind because there is a lot of discussion about Bill 13 and real properties and that kind of thing. Should something like that come up again, I don't know why I'm even asking, it's a government thing, but would you feel that they would likely do a full assessment if there was any transfer of ownership of properties at that time? Or has that been on radar at all? The government, I mean.
Associate Superintendent Corporate Services?
I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. I would say that the point of Bill 13 was to determine all the assets that everybody has who is under the government so that they have some say in what we do with that if we deem it as surplus. That was already kind of a bit in the Education Act, but Bill 13 basically gives Alberta Infrastructure the authority over all of our buildings, and if they wanted to, could force us to sell it at net book value, which could be zero. So I think that's a bit of a different conversation. But from the information we've got on Bill 13, it was basically just filled this form about, we have this information about your buildings, please review it and make sure it's up to date.
Trustee Pequin and then trustee Briggs.
So in this report, it talks about the funding that's going to be left at the end of the year, the remaining balances. So are we not spending all the money that we've been given, or are we pulling some out of reserves and that's going to be what's left in the reserves? Can you just explain that to me? Because I don't understand.
Yep. So all of this money actually sits in our deferred contribution, it doesn't sit in our reserves. And as we spend it, it gets recognized against revenue to match the expense because it's a targeted grant. So we are leaving some in there. I always think it's good to leave a little bit there just in case you need it for something, but as well too, there's a bit of a timing issue with when we get paid and when we need to do projects. So like cash flow kind of thing to make sure the cash is available because we don't get it all up front. It comes sporadically through the year. And just especially with how CMR works, because the year starts April 1, we only get half the money. We're actually trying to do most of those projects in the summer before we get the other half to get them completed. So that's kind of the piece there. We do want to be cognizant though that we're not saving too much and kind of keeping on top of that, but yeah.
Trustee Briggs.
I do want to say and give accolades to senior admin. I have seen more movement on things getting done in the last year than I have seen previously. So when I'm in my schools, everyone is quite happy with what's getting done in a timely manner. So I do have to give kudos and accolades to senior admin.
Say thank you and thank you to Stephen, and we're trying. Every day we're trying.
I have a question. I have got two questions, but I've been waiting, so I'm going to ask them. The government of Alberta has a formula for our IMR and CMR grants. Do you have any idea how the government determines these amounts? Superintendent Corporate Services?
Yes.
Deputy Superintendent.
So they do provide a pretty detailed sheet. It takes in utilization, square meters, a whole bunch of kind of different factors for just to highlight for a period of time, people were unsure of how CMR was getting calculated. They have since said that it's being calculated the same as IMR, they're just basically taking it and breaking it out between the two. But we do get quite a detailed sheet about how IMR is calculated. So yeah.
And the other question I had is more of just a clarification. Under the CMR project type table, it says dry system replacement in progress at Guthrie. What is that? Director, yes.
So the dry system is in the attic of the roof space, and it's a money pit, basically. We're repairing it every year, continuously through the year. When it does leak, it leaks into the fire rated underside of the trusses. We need to open up drywall and go in through the T-bar and the upper layer of the 5/8 drywall. So it's costing us enough that this project, back to that point about not spending all the money, this is probably a $300,000 project. So we carry money over for that. And this $75,000 is basically just to get the tender process done by the end of March for the new fiscal year into April. And then the construction will happen in the next fiscal year.
It's a fire suppression system. Right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, it's a sprinkler system, but it's a dry system opposed to the wet system that's in the T-bar ceiling.
And it's required because of how the building is built.
Yeah,
with the attic.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's good.
There's a certain amount of volume of space up in the attic space, so it's required to be sprinklered.
Trustee Pequin.
BMS system. Is that a monitoring system? I'm assuming, but I don't know. And I can figure out the rest of them except for that.
Yeah, it's a monitoring system. So we all have logins and we can see basically what the output of the equipment is and what air is going in and circulating. We can put more fresh air in and do all sorts of things just from our laptops.
It stands for Building Monitoring System.
Trustee Pequin.
And all of our schools have this, or we're slowly trying to get all of our schools on board?
It's not a complete system yet. We're working on it. We have projects coming up for BMS.
Seeing no further hands, Thank you. This was a really good report. If it's weird to say, I actually enjoyed reading it, so thank you. And I guess we'll move to 8.5, Communications Report, October and November 2024. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I will turn this over to the deputy.
Thank you, John Conrad, Deputy Superintendent. For your information, a highlight of the division communication team work. I hope you have caught the interviews, the little video clips and segments highlighting our staff excellence. Would also highlight here, the team has made a second round into every single one of our schools, really helping develop excellence for communicating and posting about the good things that are happening in our schools. And I hope that you have subscribed to our newsletter and noticed that coming out and getting back into circulation. If not, it's right on our webpage. Scroll to the bottom and subscribe. Ready to take any questions?
Trustee Murray Elliott.
Trish Murray Elliott, Ward 4. Just a comment on one of the news items, which was the pumpkin drop. One of the radio stations I was listening to, I don't remember which one, the one with Adam McHale on it. He talked about this about 4 times, but he called it Morinville Junior High School. And I was like, 4 wins, 4 wins. But if you look at the headline, they call it, it's Morinville Junior High students participate. So I can see where he got that wrong, but I was just elated to hear that. So good work, guys.
Trustee Buga.
Stacy Buga, Ward 5. I'm not asking for like the analytics and stuff, but I have definitely been seeing the videos which like show up on my personal newsfeed, which I'm guessing means that there's an uptick in algorithm where it's, you know, that usually builds. Anecdotally, have we seen an increase in engagement with these new ones? I know it'll wait for data, but
Deputy Superintendent.
And with that caveat that we should be waiting for actual data, I've heard more conversation about it, even from staff, that they've noticed the videos.
So happy with our communications team. Anyway, moving on to 8.6, 2024-2025 Superintendent Discretionary Fund. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you, Chair. So this month, again, as you know, we do not get any additional funding for any students that arrive after the September 30th. So you've heard over and over across the province when students come in, how many are actually unfunded, that we gain them. So, but for this report, we have stood still. So there is not a lot left in the discretionary dollars, but we are standing still and we are watching our schools carefully. And so yes, so this report is exactly the same as last month.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, moving to 8.7, the superintendent's report. Superintendent Warren.
Again, provided for the board's information is my monthly superintendent report.
Anybody with questions, comments? I would just like to say that I'm grateful that you attended the ASBA FGM with us. Thank you for that. I think it was beneficial for you to be there. On that note, I heard from other boards, I actually was sitting at a table in our final PD session with the Secretary Treasurer for Red Deer Public. I actually was quite surprised that Secretary Treasurers come to that as well. And so I thought to engage him in a little bit of conversation about whether or not he found it valuable. And he said, absolutely. It gives him an insight into what's happening in the province, and being able to pick the ears of MLAs or, you know, listen through discussions with their trustees. He found a lot of value in it. So I thought that was very interesting, and I thought I'd bring it forward to this table. Okay. 8.8 Administrative Procedure 315 Volunteers. Superintendent Warren.
Thank you. Provided as information for the board. again, our administrative procedures have a regular schedule of review. We've done extensive work with this, especially coming out of COVID, and many of our leaders in our schools had never been principals outside of COVID. And so as we returned back, I remember one original comment from a principal as well. I kind of forgot how busy schools are. And we are very proud of the committed parents and volunteers that are in our schools. And we feel that it is very important also that our volunteers understand that it's a privilege to volunteer in our schools because we are entrusted with the care of children. And it is a very important job that we have. So we looked at this AP very carefully. We took it to our principals. We had gave them time to put input into it, what they were looking for. And this actually, as we were updating this, some of this came as for us to add the additional exhibit that there's actually a form online now where our parents have to go on and sign because they actually need to understand that when you're with us, you are not a parent, you're working as a volunteer, and there are guidelines and expectations. So this was to broaden, make it more fulsome of an AP on both sides. So it supported our administrators, our teachers, our staff that are supporting volunteers, and then also our parents understand the role of a volunteer. And so that, like I said, the document that they need to fill out, that parents will be asked to do once a year, is that they are to understand the confidentiality and the importance of their role when they are volunteers. So again, we're prepared to answer any question. This one's gone through a lot of review and had a lot of feedback from administration, and our senior team has worked very hard on this AP. I'm quite proud of the work actually of the work that the team did.
Trustee Buga.
Stacy Buga, Ward 5. Yeah, reading through this answers a lot of questions that I've heard at my school councils. There's been, parents will be concerned about who else is in the school with their child and what are the safeguards. And to have this as in a really clear AP like this makes it very easy for us to direct them to what the expectations of all volunteers are, whether it's themselves or the other people working with their kids during the day. I do have a question though, when it comes to the vulnerable sector part of the criminal record check, I know that it's not required unless it is somebody with one-on-one, which is not an expectation of our volunteers. In fact, it's an exclusion for our volunteers to be one-on-one with a child. Is that, and my recollection of it again is that our CMP, it takes a lot more time to do that. And there was kind of some pushback on wait times and the sheer volume of vulnerable sector checks for all volunteers in schools and sport teams. Is this change, did that come more from the RCMP side of things, or the fact that there really wasn't a need? I know that there's still some parents that are just like, we just want everybody to have it, but just so that I can honestly say where that came from, because it did change in the last recent history, 10 years for sure. Thanks.
Superintendent Warren.
So just to clarify, because actually if you look at our AP from way back, even prior to the implementation of the mandatory criminal record checks vulnerable sector, when it came out for the teaching for teachers, this has all like in our field trips, et cetera, for overnight, et cetera. That vulnerable sector piece has been a very important piece for a long time, that if you're overnight or alone with kids, it's been in there. As for there is a piece of that, and I don't know if I'm going to get it. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa just to speak about what happened when the mandatory came in, because part of that is correct, but I'm going to turn it over to Lisa. But when we have volunteers in our schools, again, we don't want to have a barrier to having volunteers. And so remember that the volunteers are actually under the guidance of the teacher who's running whatever they're doing, and that who is responsible for the child in the school is that teacher in supervision. So that is why there is that separation between the two. And I'm going to turn it over because yes, part of your question is correct, but I will turn it over to the Associate Superintendent of HR.
Lisa Lacroix, Associate Superintendent of Human Resources. The actual pushback is coming from the actual RCMP. Unless they are going to be alone with the child, the RCMP will not do the vulnerable sector. That is actually in regards to our staff as well. We used to have staff here at central office. We used to do criminal record and vulnerable sector on everybody that worked for our division. They will not do them for staff members who are working here in central office, such as in our finance department or our IT department, because we do not have sole responsibility of students. So this is actually not something we decided to do on our own. This is something that we began having pushback from the police departments. Their comment on that is there is a huge amount of information that comes on a vulnerable sector that may not have anything to do with a person's job. And so that is one of the pushbacks that they had in regards to the vulnerable sector.
Trustee Buga?
Sorry, just to follow up, and that is like across the province, or is that local to whatever RCMP detachment?
It seems to be across the province because we've had the same pushback from EPS when we
Okay.
have staff go get them from EPS too. So it's not just RCMP, although that's where it started. It started trickling into the other EPS that we have as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Murray Elliott?
So just for clarification, they're saying if you're not alone with the child, so if a volunteer were to go into the school and the teacher decides that this certain student could use some additional reading help, and the volunteer and the child go into a corner somewhere or into the library, would that volunteer need a vulnerable check or not?
Deputy
Part of
Superintendent?
the, sorry,
That's okay.
John Conrad, Deputy Superintendent, thank you. Should have waited. Part of the process over the last couple of years, as illustrated here, where we've been working with RCMP, we've also had to work with our administration, which is why you can see before you a much clearer understanding of volunteers, much clearer communication process with our volunteers. So to answer that hypothetical question, we have been over the last year for sure, two really on the outset saying, when you're volunteering, coming and reading with kids, that's coming and reading at a table that's within the context of the teacher. Could be within context of many people and a librarian as well. That's okay. One-on-one help with our volunteers is not what we ask you to come in and do. And that just has to be what we do.
All right. Seeing no further questions or comments, I would really like to complete 8.9 before the lunch break. So that is Administrative Procedure 720, Teacher Staffing, Certification and Placement. Superintendent Warren.
I will be turning this over to the Associate of HR. So as per our regular schedule of reviewing our APs, this AP 720 was up for review and it has been updated.
Thank you. Lisa Lacroix, the Associate Superintendent of Human Resources. As the superintendent just described, this was part of the review. The changes are minor in some of the grammatical changes. Then there was some adjustments to the timelines. When the Associate Superintendent of Corporate Services came on board, really introduced a new process with my budget file, which helped to tighten up some of the timelines that we needed. And so using that information has allowed us to move around. We don't require some of the paperwork that we required before. It's a much smoother timeline. So hence you will see some changes to the timelines, which is the majority of the changes.
I just have one question. Is some of the changes related to the way that we are putting more emphasis on school-based budgeting or reporting or anything like that?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say that this is the timelines of the
Okay.
new, the things that Mr. Nicholson has put in place are just, they're faster, they're easier to understand. We also got ahead of ourselves before, I think, where we were making decisions and we didn't even know what our budget was at the time. So we've allowed more time for budget processing and deliberation to be put in place prior to having to do all this staffing and then have to go back to the table. We were sometimes having 2 and 3 meetings. That's not a good use of anybody's time. So we want to have one wholesome meeting. And so that ties in with all the new time.
Thank you.
And
Just to add, could you imagine if we did all the staffing rounds this last year, then we realized we lost $1.4 million and then we had to rehab all those staffing rounds with everyone?
I was just thinking that. I'm very grateful that we're not doing that. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments regarding this? Trustee Buga?
Trustee Buga, Ward 5. Just I guess as far as process goes, when it feels like this is specifically the timeline has some significant changes and movement in it that teachers would need to be apprised of. How far do these APs go when it comes to consultation? Sorry, am I having trouble? But yeah, do our teachers have access to this, or is there a group that is consulted when we're looking at timelines and stuff, or is this mainly done through central office?
Superintendent Warren?
Well, as for information as timelines and information is brought to the teachers, but we work with our administrators because they are the ones that are evaluating. They come to the table to meet about budget. So it's more about supporting our administrators to actually action these things, to look at when is the best time to action it, that it makes sense. So we bring our APs in this type of AP. This is really about working with our leadership because they're responsible, right? And then working with us. So it's more about the people that have to make the decisions for timelines.
All right, seeing no further questions or comments, we are going to recess for lunch. Returning at, what do you guys think? What's reasonable? Let's say 12:45. 12:45? All right, we will recess till 12:45. Thank you to our online participants. We'll see you in 45 minutes. All right, thank you to those who are still online, and welcome back to the public board meeting. We are now moving to item number 9 on the agenda, reports from trustees and standing committees. Chair's report is first, so mine is available for review, anybody who would like. I would like to mention a highlight in public that the Remembrance Day ceremony at Guthrie School was amazing. We had Senator Paul Simon, we had an MLA from North Edmonton, had a good conversation about the boundary issue and overcrowding at in the city schools. We had an excellent turnout from our military participants. It was really a beautiful ceremony, and truly a highlight of my month. I'm available for questions, comments, anybody? All right. For trustees report, we will start to my right with Trustee Buga.
Stacey Buga, Ward 5. November was and continues to be a very busy month. I attended one of the ASBA learning sessions. They've been doing, I don't know if you guys, I'm pretty sure everybody's getting the emails, but there's been a lot coming out. I attended one that was yesterday. Holy. Yesterday about federal politics, and it was organized by ASBA and the Ontario Public School Board Association, to just looking at, at the federal level, what a possible, they're saying spring summer election could look like, and how that affects school boards in various provinces. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, my report has been submitted, so it will be posted on the website with the agenda package. And I'm super excited for tomorrow for MPS's French immersion and pre-K Christmas concert at the Cultural Center. So that'll be the first time I've attended the French immersion. And little guys, they do 3 separate Christmas concerts, so I usually try to make it out to at least one of them. So I'm excited about that for tomorrow.
Trustee Gibbons.
Irene Gibbons, Ward 7. My report is submitted. I forgot about Surgeon Composite High School Award Night, so I will update my report. And I think the highlight for this month was the FGM at ASBA. It was great networking, learning experience. Yeah, it's good.
Trustee Dwyer?
Trustee Dwyer, Ward 3. Just a note to everybody, at Hutterite Colony, they've changed all their leadership. Some younger guys, so it could be some changes there. I attended the Morinville Streetlight grand opening. I went to the volleyball championships to watch the Camilla girls win. And Trish, I keep bringing that up, don't I? And everything else, just normal stuff. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Pequin?
Janine Beckman, Ward 1. My report has been submitted. My highlight of the month is obviously going to be Redwater Awards ceremony. It's just great that we recognize all these kids in a ceremony with all of the scholarships and the academic awards, and there was a few fine arts awards in there too. So, you know, it was great.
Trustee Briggs?
Cindy Briggs, Ward 2. My report has been submitted in the board package. My highlight was the Redwater Award ceremony. The mayor always does such a beautiful speech on behalf of the town of Redwater. And congratulations to all the recipient winners. It was nicely done.
Trustee Murray Elliott?
Trish Marie Elliott, Ward 4, and I have 4 highlights, so I'll be really brief. Number 1, the Redwater School Awards ceremony was fantastic, as always, so really enjoyed that. The Remembrance Day ceremony at Sturgeon Heights was very well done, and I was amazed at how respectful the kids were. We had some great speakers. At the Sturgeon Heights School Council, I invited as a guest one of the 2 students that represented our school at the Student Advisory Committee. And she came and gave a little talk about what that all looked like. And the staff and the parents really enjoyed that, I think, and the student also. So I would highly encourage you to do that, because I think it's a great interaction, and it kind of closes the circle with these kids and our school council and the reason we do all these things. So that was great. I'm going to continue to do that. And finally, the Sturgeon Composite High School Award ceremony was fantastic as always. And I think I heard that our students received over $282,000 in awards. So it was a great month.
Thank you. 9.3 Committee of the Whole report. Available in the package. Questions, comments? Okay. Policy Committee report. Trustee Pequin?
We don't have a report this month.
Okay. 10. Reports from special committees and task groups. 10.1 Alberta School Boards Association representative. Trustee Gibbons?
Irene Gibbons, Ward 7. So ASBA had their FGM the Monday the 18th. And so I have uploaded the document on how we voted and if the proposal was passed. They posted the next day, I think, on their website, the position statements that were carried. And it's located in our ASBA drive under, I think, the 2024 file. And the next Zone 2-3 meeting is, Friday, December 6th.
And just to add to that, they have December 2nd is a lunch and learn type session on Bill 20. It's a follow-up with the lawyers. Our superintendent and secretary treasurer are invited to that if you want some additional free time with a lawyer about what Bill 20 looks like, setting up for election. That's a follow-up to the one that they held last month. So that should be interesting. December 9th is the speaker's corner, and that's always in an evening. The speaker that night is going to be Kathleen Lane, discussing the role of trustees in creating safe and caring schools and what our role needs to be in that. So that should be an interesting speaker's corner as well. Just if anybody's wanting to take in some extra PD, those are usually 1 hour to 2 hour sessions tops.
Question from trustee Murray Elliott.
Just wondering, when I was at PSBC, Parkland School Division had brought up the same concern that I had raised about the omnibus motion of updating. And they had mentioned that their board chair was going to request that the one that referred to the use of public schools be removed from that. So just wondering if that happened.
Yeah. So it doesn't totally point it out, but in 11 on the voting, it was brought forward to take out along with 44, 45, and 46 out of the omnibus voting. And we voted on them individually. And so we had voted against changing it. And it was defeated, so it wasn't changed. They retired 44 and 45 and 46. So yeah, so 25 will stay on the books.
Seeing no further questions, 10.2, Public School Boards Association of Alberta Representative, trustee Murray Elliott.
That's me. Again, they seem to outdo themselves each time, so I don't know how they'll continue doing that. We had some great speakers. I think I forwarded to everybody the meeting summary. The medical officer of health was there talking about vaping, and I learned a couple of interesting things. There are no taxes on vaping and vapes. Yeah. Unlike cigarettes. So it's thought that one of the reasons kids stopped smoking was because it got too expensive due to taxes. So vaping, it sounds like, is very affordable. And also there is a campaign called Behind the Haze, which is put out by AHS. And I don't believe anyone in the entire room had ever heard of it before, but it might be a good resource that we can use to try to discourage kids from the vaping. I thought I would be very remiss to have the medical officer of health in the room and not bring to his attention, which I did afterwards, that we need some help from AHS with medical assistance for some of our students. And how our teachers are curriculum and educational experts and not necessarily medical experts. And unfortunately, he did not have a response for me at the time. So, also a highlight was Dr. Charmaine Brooks gave a presentation. She's one of the new consultants with PSBAA, and it was on AI. And it was the best thing I've ever heard on AI. She gave some really concrete examples of how it can work, what it can be used for, and those sorts of things. So that was really good. As far as the business meeting, we ended up with a couple of calls to action. One thing is we would like to send, if someone could send all of our board meeting dates to them so that they can pick a day with us that where they can come for a visit, probably the executive and the director and the CEO. So I wonder if I could speak to Crystal about, I know in my calendar, I have all the old ones and the new ones, and I don't want to send them the wrong dates, so. And do we want to do it on a cow day or a board meeting day or?
My preference is cow days. We do
So
have,
maybe we should send them our cow dates.
nobody has an issue with that, I would say so.
The other request was if we could have our ASBA push to get dates and locations for their 2027 SGM, because there's some pressure for PSBAA to book theirs, and since ASBA hasn't booked theirs yet, it's more convenient for our members if it piggybacks. So
Is this the issue with whether to move it back to Red Deer now that the hotel is renovated?
But if ASBA is still in Calgary, some people don't want to have to move back and forth. They also asked if we would share any copies of our advocacy letters that we send to ministers, if we would copy PSBAA in those, if possible. And one thing they mentioned is the charter schools are inviting ministers and MLAs and government officials and local government officials into the schools a lot. And they're having these wonderful, look at the great things we're doing moments. And the public schools don't seem to be doing that as much. So they recommended that perhaps we should send more invites out to get local government into our schools for a couple of reasons. Number one, look at the great things we're doing. And also look at the realities of what our schools look like. So sometimes the government isn't even aware of what's going on in some classrooms. So I don't think that's a bad idea. I don't know if we would have if it would be successful. And finally, just a reminder, if anyone is interested to follow the association on social media and share our posts. And that's about it. If there's any questions.
Seeing none, thank you for your report. 10.3, Rotary, Trustee Dwyer.
Yeah, just one thing on the Rotary came up, we talked about already, was scholarship and what happened there. I don't think we have to talk about that again, but also that Rotary will have a float in the Christmas parade, and 6 of the Interact students are going to be with us on that. So, and all the other groups that are involved there, it's kind of how their float goes. We just invite all the groups that are involved with, and we get on it. They bring their banners and away we go. Just some other information. Our founding member that was still coming to meetings passed away last weekend. So, so there's some of that, but that's about all from Rotary.
What day is the Christmas parade?
It's this Saturday.
It's a nice Saturday.
December 8th, is it? Something. Oh, sorry, you're right. November 30th.
Oh, all right. Well, it's gonna be cold. Okay. Thank you for that. 10.4, Chamber of Commerce meetings. Trustee Buga.
I can speak to the Morinville Chamber has been held on our committee of the whole days for the last, I think 3 months. So again, it's scheduled for next Wednesday during committee of the whole. So unfortunately, our timing has not been great to attend this year.
I attended the St. Albert Chamber of Commerce very late, but I did see the last part of the Mayor Hanatchu's address to the St. Albert Chamber. Interesting things said and interesting things left unsaid. The next St. Albert Chamber of Commerce is on the 11th, and I think I will be attending. So, anybody else attend any chamber meetings? Okay. Community Services Advisory Board, Trustee Briggs.
There was a meeting on November 18th. I was away, and the next meeting will be in January. So I will have a report then.
Thank you very much. And the addition to the agenda, 10.6, Rural Caucus. Trustee Yuga.
I attended Rural Caucus, is held always just before ASBA starts. They had elections. Some of things to note, though, there was changes to the terms of reference. So they'll be voting in directors alternately every second year going forward, as well as they're changing their fight right now. Whoever is the chair of Rural Caucus, it falls to their school division to handle the finances of Rural Caucus, meaning that their finance department sometimes is not aware that a trustee is running for chair of this organization and the responsibilities that fall back on it. There has been acknowledgement of that many trustees don't feel comfortable putting their name forward, and it's becoming a barrier. So we have voted now to contract all financial responsibilities out so that that is not incumbent on the upcoming chair of the organization. The other thing they have changed now is the fee structure has historically always been a cost recovery where school boards are invoiced at the end of the fiscal year on actual cost. They are changing that to a budgeted cycle, which means that I'm not sure if we have already received the invoice from past year of approximately $800. I believe it was few dollars less than that. And then we will also receive an invoice in December or in the next few weeks for $800 for 2025. So it is not being double billed. We are now paying for last year's and then moving forward with a budget of $800 per member. So same numbers, but we're going to bill, it'll feel like we're getting double billed right now. So just no surprises there. Budget discussions and voting will be held at fall general meetings now instead of in the spring for budgeting reasons and the way that they're kind of changing their fee structure. We had some good discussions on transportation, mainly on recruitment and retention of drivers in rural schools, and some discussion about mental health advocacy. Rural Caucus is pushing hard for the results of the mental health in schools pilot program research that's being done at the U of C, because there was a significant funding line that was attached to that mental health in schools pilot, and the fact that the research was going to be done behind it. We haven't heard anything about that, so they've been pushing government to find that data, especially how it pertains to rural schools, and some discussion of challenges and successes with those programs within our unique setting. I have uploaded the report to our PD folder on Google Drives as well. Happy to take questions.
Seeing none, we will move to 11. Any unfinished business? None. Comments and question period. Do we have any, Deputy Superintendent? No. All right, 13 in camera. Can I get a motion to go in camera, please? Moved by Trustee Briggs. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Does anybody need a break before this?